Welcome back to Considerate Life. I'm wearing my Matt Walsh plaid shirt today because I want to talk about something that is cultural, but can have, I mean, everything seems to be political these days. Now, I want to say some things that are intentionally provocative, but not necessarily intentionally offensive. And I want to talk about human male aggression. This was sparked by a post that I saw on LinkedIn. There was a woman who obviously has lived through some traumatic events in her life that was talking about online male culture. And so I just started thinking about this biological impetus, this inherent natural aggression that human men seem to have. Now, I'm talking about tendencies, right? So, I mean, somebody can get the comments and say, well, not all men are aggressive. There's an inherent aggression to being a human man, a human male, right? From boys to men, there's an aggression to being a human male. And so in talking about tendencies, like the tendency to be an early bird or the tendency to be a night owl, there's an inherent aggression to the male human experience, right? So the question becomes, how do we deal with this biological reality? Now, on the feminist side of things, there's been a continuum of responses from the less extreme, labeling everything that men do out of this aggression as toxic, right? But some of the things that men do out of their aggression is they play sports, they compete, right? Or our entire sports world is initially built off of this aggression combined with competition. They create, right? So if you combine this sort of aggression with something like intelligence and problem solving, you get somebody like a Elon Musk who's changing the world in sort of an corporate empire building motif. If you take this human aggression, male aggression, and you couple it with overt sexuality, you get something like the porn industry, right? So labeling everything that is born out of this male aggression as toxic, I think, is a misstep. On the more extreme feminist response, I saw a woman from Colorado, I think a few years ago, saying that baby boys should be aborted so that they don't grow into men who become abusers of women. That's probably the most extreme solution to this naturally inherent male human aggression, right? So in this video, I wanted to talk about the fact that there are things that restrain or constrain male aggression, and they are these: civilization, family, and religion, right? The reason I wanted to point this out is because women seem to be increasingly anxious about male aggression. And I think that as a father of 4 daughters, I certainly feel that in society, and I'm aware of it with some very personal cost associated with that. You know, when my daughters go somewhere and they're staying somewhere, I have them call me, like, tell me that you got somewhere safe, that you're safe behind a locked door somewhere, because everybody sort of has this sense that society is becoming more increasingly dangerous, and increasingly dangerous for women in particular. And I'm not immune to that sense. I think that there's some optimization costs and trade-offs here that modern feminists don't seem to see as part of the exchange. So we said civilization, family, and religion are things that constrain otherwise unrestrained male aggression, especially in the areas of human sexuality. So in this fourth wave feminism, we've seen women in our society use their freedom that they've garnered. I mean, I think that Western civilization has done an intentional job of creating spaces where girls and women can work and play alongside boys and men. We've created that. In recent statistics, the majority of young women going off to college is more than young men that are going off to college. So whatever the goals were for feminism as it was coming up in the 60s and 70s, I think those have been largely reached in society. But I also think that in Western society, you can make a case that females, women, have used their freedom poorly at times. As much as there's an inherent aggression to human males, I think there's an inherent attractiveness, a physical attractiveness to human females, women. And I think what we've seen in Western societies is that there are ways in which women use their inherent physical attractiveness to leverage it for their careers, and in some cases to directly monetize it, like in say, for example, OnlyFans. They're directly monetizing their physical attractiveness. And so I'm restraining a moral judgment on that, although I think it's obvious. And I want to make a more sociological or political point, and that is this. If you want the kind of society where women have the just unrestrained freedom to use their physical attractiveness to better themselves in their career and in their finances, some of those things come with an increasing unrestraint on men, because as we become less civilized, and I think social media can do that, it removes some of these restraints that I think civilization has imposed. One of the things being law and order, the whole overthrowing the patriarchy and defunding the police, it pulls at these threads of law and order that have been in place for centuries, if not millennia, and it makes society less safe because it makes men less constrained. Family has constrained men. One of the things that my friend Frank Turek has said is that one of the things that marriage does is it domesticates men, right? It takes men that would otherwise be just profligates, and it domesticates them. It makes them connected to women and children that are biologically theirs, right? And then finally, religion. There's a natural constraint to human male aggression, especially sexual aggression, with religion. Now, again, these are tendencies. Now, have men used religious positions of authority to do some deviant things? Yes, absolutely they have. Just like all men in power have done that. But that's not an inherent feature of religion. It's not an inherent feature of a life of what we might call genuine spirituality, right? So we've had these restraining factors in our society, and family and law and order and a deeply held personal religious life that tends to, like all moral decisions, tends to restrain our baser impulses. And yet the left believes that they can start pulling the threads of civilization, start dissolving the family, and doing away with religious communities and their commitments, while at the same time maintaining the kind of society where women and children are just as protected and free as they were in former eras. And that's just not the case. So I think that fourth wave feminism, or whatever it's called, it needs to start looking at some of the corollaries of the dissolution of civilization, the family, and the church, and finding these causal connections between these long-held societal institutions and the increasing anxiety that they feel, where men are increasingly unrestrained by these civil and religious and spiritual factors. And so I'm not denying that there is a kind of unease in the atmosphere of the West. But what I am saying is that if we were to move back to a place where a high value for women is, for lack of a better term, chastity, chastity and sexual restraint. So I ran this thought experiment with two of my older daughters, 15 and 19. And I said, imagine there's a young man in his 20s who he either signs a sports contract or he sells a business or something like that, a patent, and he's all of a sudden wealthy and successful. What are the odds that a man in that life stage is going to get married, commit himself to one woman in a monogamous, lifelong relationship? And they were like, probably not anytime soon. And I think that's right. But the question is why? And I think the answer is that he has at his disposal a practically limitless series of relationships that he can be in, where he can have all the advantages of a sexual relationship with a woman and no disadvantages of lifelong monogamous commitments, financial, civil, or otherwise, right? Now imagine we lived in a society where the main value among young women was chastity, right? Preserving their sexual relationships to, let's just even say meaningful sexual relationships, meaningful relationships. Now, in our house, we preach that sex is only to be had between a man and a woman who are married, right? They're in a covenant before God. It's a lifelong commitment. And in that context, sex is a wonderful thing where if somebody gets pregnant, it's a joyous occasion. It's not a tragedy. The man is there. He's made a commitment before God and two families that he's going to be faithful, a good provider, all the things, right? Sort of a Bidenism.
You know the thing.
So now let's go back to our hypothetical. You take a young man who is in his 20s and becomes successful. And yet he's in a society where all of the young women view their sexual relationships in terms of valuing themselves, valuing chastity, valuing their relationship with their future husband, right? And there's a high value in those things. Now, what are the odds that this young man starts looking for a wife and not just a casual string of hookups? I think it at least increases those odds dramatically, right? But what has changed? Not the young man and his success. What's changed is the value and the restraint among the young women. And so I think that's just at least a hypothetical thought experiment to say one of the things that has gone wrong in Western society is that women have used their freedom that they've garnered in our society poorly. The other thing is that it's not just feminism, but other aspects of our society tend to be pulling at these threads of civilization and family and religion in ways that are undermining long-term the safety of women and children in the society. So that's it. I just saw that LinkedIn post and was compelled to organize my thoughts in a way that I thought may be helpful. All right. Thanks for watching.